So what is happiness, really? And is it the same for everybody? For centuries, that question has been right at the heart of philosophy. Today, we're going to dive into a historic clash between two thinkers, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, who had radically different answers. And their ideas still shape how we think about a good life today. Let's just jump right into the core of their debate with one simple question. Is all happiness created equal? Think about it. Is that quick hit of joy you get from a social media like the same as the deep, lasting satisfaction you get from finishing a great book? This is the exact puzzle that sits right at the center of their philosophies. Okay, so before we get into their big disagreement, we have to start with the revolutionary idea that they actually both agreed on: the happiness principle. Now, this principle, it's the absolute bedrock of a theory called utilitarianism. To put it simply, it says the morally right action is whatever creates the most good for the most people. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But as we're about to see, the devil is totally in the details. All right, so first up is Jeremy Bentham. Now, this guy took this principle and tried to turn it into a science. He wanted to create a really straightforward, almost mathematical way to calculate happiness. For Bentham, the answer to that question we asked at the beginning was a clear and simple yes. All pleasures are fundamentally the same. The only thing that matters is how much pleasure an action produces, how intense it is, and how long it lasts. At the end of the day, it's all about the numbers. Bentham had this famous and honestly kind of shocking quote where he said, "The pleasure of a child's game is the same as the pleasure adults get from poetry." This just perfectly sums up his point. For him, the source of the pleasure is totally irrelevant. A silly game and a profound piece of art, they're judged on the exact same scale. Only the amount of happiness they create actually matters. So Bentham's whole system was built on three really simple pillars. First off, he believed that we humans are driven by two masters: seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. That's it. Second, your intentions don't matter, only the results do. We call that consequentialism. And finally, the happiness of a whole society is just the grand total of every single person's happiness all added up. But this beautifully simple system ran headfirst into a very big and, let's be honest, pretty insulting problem. Critics had an absolute field day with Bentham's ideas. They called it a philosophy for pigs. Talk about a brutal takedown, right? The argument was that if all pleasure is equal, then a happy pig rolling around in the mud is living just as good a life as a fulfilled human being. Ouch. So why was this critique so devastating? Well, because it suggests Bentham's theory completely ignores everything we value about being human, intellect, creativity, morality, love. It basically reduces the idea of a good life to just satisfying our most basic sensory urges, no different from any other animal. And this is where our second thinker, John Stuart Mill, steps onto the stage. He saw the power in utilitarianism, but he knew it needed a serious upgrade to save it from that whole philosophy for pigs attack. Mill's genius move was to introduce a hierarchy. He basically said, whoa, hold on, not all pleasures are created equal. He split them into two categories. You've got your lower pleasures, the basic bodily sensations we share with animals, and then you have the higher pleasures, the ones that engage our minds, our hearts, and our morals. And this right here is the absolute core of his argument. Mill said that these higher pleasures are qualitatively better. That means the feeling of accomplishment you get from learning a new skill is, just by its very nature, a better kind of happiness than the pleasure of eating a tasty meal. And this difference in quality, he argued, is way more important than any difference in quantity. So here's the main event, the central conflict in a nutshell. For Bentham, happiness is simple math. You just add up the pleasure points. But for Mill, you have to ask a much deeper question. What kind of happiness is it? It's not just about how happy you are, it's about how you are happy. And you know what? Mill didn't just stop there. He took this whole quality idea and used it to solve another huge problem for utilitarianism. How do you account for complex human values like justice and individual rights? For Mill, morality wasn't just some tool you use to achieve happiness. He believed that being a moral person is a source of that higher happiness. And he argued that justice isn't the enemy of the greater good. In fact, he said, protecting everyone's individual rights is actually the best way to guarantee the greatest happiness for society in the long run. And this difference leads to two totally different visions for what society should look like. For Bentham, the social good is just a simple sum of everyone's personal pleasure. But for Mill, it's a much more complex public good, where things like justice and rights are absolutely essential. So ultimately, Mill shifts the focus from just maximizing personal pleasure to promoting a much broader public welfare. So where does that leave us? At the end of the day, we've moved from Bentham's simple quantitative calculator to Mill's much more complex qualitative vision of what a good human life actually looks like. The debate these two started completely transformed utilitarianism. It was no longer just about maximizing a number. Thanks to Mill, the central question became so much deeper. What kind of happiness should we, as individuals and as a society, really be striving for? And this brings the whole question right back to you. When you decide how to spend your time, whether to watch another episode of a show or call a friend, whether to take the easy path or the more challenging one, are you thinking like Bentham, just counting up the units of pleasure? Or are you thinking more like Mill, really weighing the quality of the happiness you pursue?